Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to the session on e-bike share and cargo bike innovation, which is chaired today by me, Beate Kubitz, and Michael Barratt. And I have 4 exciting guests for you. Thank you so much for inviting us, Landor links, to this session, which I'm sure everyone will find very useful and interesting. I'm Beate Kubitz. I'm down as a mobility consultant here. What I do is research into new mobility, servicisation of transport, all sorts of shared transport, bikes, cars, scooters, anything that's sort of new and innovative on the transport horizon. But lately, my interest has been very much in cargo bikes. I've been setting up an organisation called Cargo Dale, which came out of lockdown and the realisation that we were going to see many more deliveries, and that van and car deliveries weren't necessarily the right thing for the rural area in which I live. We have a lot of small lanes, a lot of narrow paths, and great big Mercedes Sprinters kind of churn up our landscape, and our air quality isn't that great. So I set up Cargo Dale, which is a cargo bike delivery service in Calderdale, and what started as a single bike in the valley has become 4 bikes for 3 different towns. We've completed 2,000 deliveries in 2020, and we have nearly 20 volunteers and now some paid staff in our service. So in terms of cargo bikes and their prospects, I think what I'm here for is to kind of say how exciting it is to be able to do cargo bikes, not just in city centres, but they have potential right the way across the country. I know Michael has some exciting and interesting insights into different uses for cargo bikes as well, so I'll hand over to him to introduce himself and to kick off the discussion with the panel. Right. Michael.
Hopefully that's me showing. Right, good morning everybody. Exciting times for the industry, for the cycling industry that is. Thank you, Beate. Firstly, thanks for Landor for inviting me to chair this event. So my role is to look at major construction, so I look at safety, environment and inclusiveness, so how sites work on the network. I'm a cargo bike rider myself, so since lockdown I think I've done over 3,000 miles delivering for food banks. But a few years back, I wanted to look at, can we use cargo bikes in construction? And typical responses from the industry was, oh, you can't put that on there, mate. And, oh, you can't use a bike for steel or concrete. No, you can't, but you can use it for other stuff. Bikes play a massive part in helping the environment, helping improve the safety around what we're doing. And it's really important that we also consider the people that we might be impacting when we're cycling. So what we've been doing with numerous companies and boroughs, we've set up a working group to bring people together to look at best practice. We're writing a guidance document as well at the moment. And for us is making sure we set up a nice holistic package around construction. And I'll just drop in Hackney because that's probably my favourite one at the moment. So we set up a cycling only zone around the site. We've set up a cargo bike loading area. We've trained the marshals to manage the bikes. We've got the supply chain buy-in. It's a nice example to use, but it's getting the whole industry involved in that is the challenging times. So with e-bikes being a nice to have now, even though mine isn't electric assist, I'm saving up. But it's how do we promote that? And the people on this session now are going to hopefully give us some good stuff, which I'm sure they will do. And I'll pass back to Beate to do the first introduction.
So we have 4 different people with very different perspectives on the shared mobility and cargo bike developments. To start with, we have Duncan Robertson, the UK manager from Dott. Duncan, would you like to kick off and tell us a bit about the how Dott's going in the UK?
Thank you very much, guys. Hello, everybody. Just before I start, I am, whilst I don't contribute to the cargo bike world from a professional capacity, I have a cargo bike and I take my kids to and from nursery in it, and it's amazing. So I will do my best to bring a personal touch to the discussion later on cargo bikes. But for the time being, I want to take a little bit of time to talk to you guys about what I consider the future of bike sharing to be, or what it might look like. I'm the general manager for the UK for Dott. Dott is a European e-bike and e-scooter operator. We operate about 30,000 vehicles a day across 16 cities, and including, and we're going to be launching our e-bike share in London later this year. I myself have been in the bike sharing world for 10 plus years now, starting out at TfL, rolling out the Santander cycle scheme. Then I moved over to Mobike, and we'll certainly talk about some of the learnings from that shortly. And now, obviously, as I mentioned, I'm at Dott. So I've been involved in some kind of capacity in bike share for quite some time, and particularly over a rather eventful period in the recent past of how it's changed. So yeah, as I say, I want to talk to everyone about where I think the future of bike sharing might go, or what it might look like. And maybe it's the lockdown that's been happening over the last best part of a year now, but I've been reflecting on how the industry has changed over the years, particularly in the recent past, and what that might mean for the future. So I've picked a handful of what I consider to be some of the key learnings that I certainly, and I think the industry more widely, has learnt, and how that will shape the future of the industry. Can I have the next slide, please? So firstly, I wanted to cover why I believe in bike share, because for all of the ups and downs, all of the pain points, all the frustrations that there have been, there are always some fundamentals that I always return to, particularly when the going gets tough. And I would like to remember that bike sharing is convenient, it is green, and it is active, and it is equitable. It allows people to experience the benefits of cycling without necessarily needing to buy a bike or maintain a bike or worry about if it's going to be stolen or not. Bike sharing, including e-bikes, is very much an active mode of travel and is considerably more environmentally sustainable than motorized transport. Bike share can and should be open to everyone in the city, and can be deployed everywhere with increasingly great ease. This is especially true for bike share that doesn't require a docking station. Not only does bike share open up a city, but it can open up cycling. Nearly half of bike share riders are women, compared to 25% in the wider cycling community. E-bikes as well have particularly opened up cycling to more and more groups that simply wouldn't have considered riding a regular bike. There are also millions of other reasons why bike share is so great, but I won't go through all of them because I'll bore you to tears. Next slide, please. So, as I'm sure many of you will have witnessed, that there's been a number of changes in the bike share market over recent years. I think three of the most impactful, not necessarily always positive, are the ones listed just here. Firstly, docked over dockless, or dockless over docked. This saw a massive disruption in the market and allowed for much greater access to bike share, due to considerably lower infrastructure costs. But with that came a large dollop of chaos, and I'll come to this shortly as well. Secondly, increasing amount of electrification. As battery technology has improved, we've seen the electric bike share market just boom. The electric bike market as a whole boom, but this has also gone for electric cargo bikes and electric bike share. And as I mentioned before, this has brought with it many more riders and many more varied riders, and a much larger operation that allows people to keep an eye on how things are going while they're changing batteries. Thirdly, there's been fairly easy access to money, and this has largely died down. And as again, I will come to this a little bit later, but it did enable a major paradigm shift in the industry. However, we have seen that having lots of money is not necessarily a positive. The drive for growth at all costs, in many cases, allowed people to take their eye off the ball, and this is where things have gone quite badly wrong for certain, and that's why certain companies and operators, and that's why we've seen a lot come and go, a lot of mergers and a lot of consolidation. So I would go so far as saying that having slightly less VC money is potentially a competitive advantage to be playing in this industry. So we've seen 3, 4 years of disruption, but now I would argue that the dust has mainly settled. Thank you. And what we see is that the fervour is now diminished. Bike share is still very much on the map. Markets are still opening and there is more and more demand. Access to bike share is better than ever, with greater choice for cities and rapidly improving technology. However, we have seen that our values have been tested, or what we value has been tested. And unsurprisingly to many, having orderly and tidy streets is extremely highly valued. And this is something that wasn't necessarily considered to the greatest degree. However, what we've also realized is that we value cycling, and we just need to make sure that we're getting that balance right. And local authorities, especially, this is where they've really stepped in and stepped up by increasing their commitment to providing more and more space for parking. So, which is something I'll come on to a little bit later. So here we are. The door has been somewhat unceremoniously bashed open by the first wave of dockless bike share. And what we're left with is a major opportunity to be able to articulate what value we want in our cities, and also to know that we want bikes. Next slide, thank you. So at this point, I just want to look at some of the challenges that the industry had. Oh, too far. The challenges that the industry has experienced, and see if we're any closer to solving them. So as I see it, the three main ones are street clutter, vandalism, and financial sustainability. So on street clutter, when the first wave of dockless bike share came along, it offered an enormous amount, and I go back to those points right at the beginning. It offered all those things about that bike share can offer, but the technology and the maturity just wasn't really there to be able to operate bikes without homes in cities. I can assure you that the problems that we saw with this were possibly not avoidable with the technology that was available, but the will to make that happen was there. It just wasn't that the technology wasn't quite in place to keep up. In terms of vandalism, when I say vandalism here, what I really mean is bikes being privatized. So some vandalism is just factored into the way that we operate bike sharing. It happens to bikes, it happens to bus stops, it happens to traffic cones. But vandalism usually means that a bike gets damaged, painted, all those kind of things, and just left in a heap. What privatization is where the vandals took the lock, which meant that they were effectively getting a free bike, and this was rife and very difficult to manage. In terms of the third point, financial sustainability, as I spoke about before, a key misstep for early operators was prioritizing massive growth over financial sustainability. This meant expanding into way too many areas and not looking after the costs of the operation and providing a high quality enough service to bring in and maintain customers. So the next slide. So are we learning? And the next slide after that. Yes, we are, and there's a few things that we're learning very quickly and are able to deploy. So cities and operators are now working much more closely together and are much more in tune with what one another need. There's been a kind of major confluence in cities helping to provide more parking bays and operators having the technology to be able to operate to ensure that bikes are parked in those bays. As you can see from these images on the right-hand side, the top image is before the bays in Paris. This is the Champs-Élysées. The bays in Paris were implemented. This is for scooters in this instance. And before we switched on our smart parking technology, the one below is after that. We now achieve best part of 95% parking compliance, and with collaboration with the Paris authorities, we've got a really good dense network of parking bays. Next slide, please. So there is much better technology available as well. So I'll talk about Dott in this instance, but this goes across a lot of the industry. We wanted to produce our own bike to design out some of the issues that I mentioned before. So key thing that you'll see here is that the lock is gone. It's now in the rear hub, so that there's no concern around it being broken, people being able to use the bike as they wish. We've got much more improved IoT and GPS technology. It's all now no longer in the lock, but hidden away in the handlebars and integrated into that whole handlebar section. And the accuracy of our GPS and the complementary measures that we have mean that we can really ensure that people park in those parking bays. So these are just three of the things that have gone a really long way to helping improve on the issues that we experienced in the first wave of dockless bike share in particular. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. So so collaboration between cities has improved enormously. I mentioned this before, but there are much more contracts, there's more regulation, and the rules are kind of almost in place, which has allowed for a much clearer understanding between local authorities and operators. So whilst in the UK in particular, there aren't any explicit laws from stopping operators from starting up an operation if they wish, but there are many more contracts in place, and nearly all the operators that are now around have way too much to lose by not playing by the rules that are set. So it means that there's a much better relationship between local authorities and operators. Next slide, please. This is the final one on are we doing better? We're doing better on financial sustainability as well. So most operators around today are much more focused on ensuring that their operations are profitable, focusing on efficiency and the reality of running bike share in each city. The image here is just a screenshot of our back office system showing what a driver's tasks for that particular part of their shift is. And you can see that it's all in a line. They go from one to the other, it's much more efficient. And it means that we can pass those efficiency savings across into the pockets of the consumer. So I think things are getting better. The industry and major stakeholders are learning how to make bike share work. And now I'll turn to quickly focus on what I think the future will hold. Next slide, please. Inevitably, I need to talk about COVID. And if it weren't already clear, COVID is having a huge impact on travel. People are saying that they're reducing their travel by up to 90%. People are driving less and they're actually cycling more. We did a survey and some of the statistics are up there on the right-hand side. So I very much see that the reset button on how we get around has been well and truly smashed over the past year. And the question is, are we happy to go back to where we were before? Or do we see this as a real opportunity to change things positively for forever? Next slide, please. So the future is very much yet to be decided. And it very much depends largely on how we can continue as operators to collaborate with cities. I will argue that the technology is now there, that the operations are up to speed and ready to go. But what we need is the extensive parking allocation and the control over some market conditions to be able to really thrive and push into the future. The market has matured enormously. And bike share is ready to make a really significant contribution to city transport. So my last words are these: don't discount bikes. I know you're all looking at that scooter. Don't discount bikes. They've been around for 100 years, over 100 years, and they'll be around for another 100. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Duncan. It's certainly really interesting to follow the story of how bike share has developed from sort of teaching people to learn how to change their behaviours, to learn how to operate it, and then to learn how to operate it as good citizens without leaving bikes strewn all over the pavements, and how also that contributes to financial sustainability. I remember in the early days of mobike stories of having to retrieve bikes from Macclesfield and all sorts of extraordinary places, which must have had not only an impact on Macclesfield, but the bottom line as well. So the next contributor to our session today is Andy Salkeld from the Cycling Coordinator at Leicester City Council, and I'm hoping to hear a bit more about Santander Cycles in Leicester. Andy.
Hello, hopefully you can hear me. I'm Andy Salkeld from Leicester City Council, and I'm leading on the development of Santander Cycles scheme in Leicester, our bike share scheme. Go next slide, please. Thank you. What I think is interesting about the bike share market and the evolution of the bike share market and our role in it on behalf of the city is both the technology that we're choosing to go with in Leicester and the governance structure. So the scheme in Leicester is led by Leicester City Council. It's owned by Leicester City Council. We retain the rights to the data collection and the commercialisation of the scheme. We were approached by Santander UK around about 2 years ago to consider a sponsorship partnership for the development of a bike share scheme, and we've subsequently kind of developed initially ahead of terms in a legal sponsorship agreement with Santander UK, so bringing on board both a level of investment from the bank, but probably more importantly a level of business support and scheme development support, which has helped us evolve the requirements that we were looking for, the thinking and the application that we were looking for within the city. And then subsequently tender the delivery of a scheme through which we've recruited or made a delivery and operational commitment with Ride On Scotland, called Ride On Scotland because their other scheme in the UK recently launched is in Dundee. They're a Spanish-owned company, for those people who are not familiar with Ride On. And what we went through a tender process within which we were not prescriptive about electric bikes, other than to say it's an option. And Ride On came back with a bid which was of an all-electric bike scheme. We did want a docking station-based scheme. We wanted a scheme which was approximately 500 bikes in size, and that's what we got through that tender process. So that's where we are heading in that following that tender process. It's also important to say that we're working with local sponsors. So the advent of the headline sponsorship with Santander has been very productive. Sponsors on a local level, organisations as varied as the Big Local in St Matthews, which is a charitable organisation funded by the Big Lottery, Samwiths, which is a food manufacturing organisation, High Cross, which is a major retailer, the NHS, which is going through some substantial changes as well as challenges at the moment, and Bid Leicester, so the business improvement district in the city, as well as conversations which are detailed at the moment, and so we're just in the trenches with them, with the universities, student accommodation, sports clubs, and other delivery partners. And the importance of those local supporters, as well as some of the seed funding that we get from Santander, is that we can develop a social inclusion project for the scheme from the outset. It's intrinsic to the delivery of the bike share in Leicester as a form of public transport. Next slide, please. So just a very sketchy outline of where we are. The image and circle in the middle, the pink circle in the middle, shows the area of interest, the area within which we are seeding the 50 docking stations with 1,000 docks across them, the 500 bikes initially into the central area of the city. It's about 4 kilometres north to south and 2 to 3 kilometres east to west. This is just a sketch example. It's based around pre-COVID travel demands, development demands, transport hubs, major campuses. and it's also based around the focus of the developing cycle network in the within the city, because our target audience are obviously new or returning people, new or returning cyclists, not necessarily existing confident riders. It also focuses on the Bikes for All social inclusion areas, which from our health and wellbeing surveys kind of indicate there's significant areas of most need in terms of short distance trips for utility and essential services. We were super keen as well to in the procurement process to find a supplier with whom the micromobility offers, and not be determined by them, not be led purely by the market. The City Council recognises that's part of its transport strategies. Micromobility and the consideration of micromobility as a form of public transport is not something we should just leave to the market. And hence the fact that the City Council wanted to retain the data ownership. If there's anything we learned from the flurry of, or the overinflation of the kind of pop-up bike world, which we all experienced 2 or 3 years ago, was that data has a value, and data is an entry point into the markets. It is an evolving market, it's an evolving world, and we have to engage in that world and not shy away from it and leave it to futures developments funders who have different interests often from the civic and public responsibilities that we've all got in front of us. Next slide, please. So just when is this happening? What's happening? Well, we're currently in phase 1 of the system testing. So the first 120 bikes and the first 15 docking stations are out on street at the moment. This photograph you can see in front of you is of one of my colleagues who was out testing one of the bikes just yesterday in the snow in Leicester. He says it handles very well. and was having good fun on it. But it's important to emphasise that this is an essential thing to do. It's an essential service that we're testing, software and hardware testing, security testing, the mechanical testing of the bikes is crucial, and it will allow us as early as possible in February, in the middle of winter, not a traditional time to be launching a bike share scheme, but we're not in normal circumstances, living through a public health crisis when we need to get people to work, when we need to get people to hospitals and supermarkets and essential services, and we need to care for the health and well-being of our citizens of the city. Means we've got to get on with it and not leave these bikes sat in a factory or sat in a warehouse waiting for the sun to shine and for the fee-paying customers to appear. That's part of the transport resilience focus of the project. So as early as possible in February, we think second or third week of February, we'll be making these bikes available initially to on offer to around about 700 primarily health and care workers who signed up to our Bike Aid project over the summer as part of the active travel resilience work, which was taking place in Leicester as it has done in other cities. So there's several hundred workers, low paid, predominantly women, predominantly non-car owners, predominantly bus reliant, who can no longer get on buses because they need to get to the care home that they work in or the hospital that they work in. And they need to do so without struggling with the virus in any way more than everyone else is struggling with it. Bear with me 1 second. We'll go into phase. We don't know when the public launch will take place. That's yet to be agreed with our public health colleagues. Obviously, there's not a public market in the same way at the moment. We will be focusing on key workers as part of the resilience planning. Through April, we will be going through phase 3 of implementation. So the additional 35 docking stations will be introduced, and from April onwards, at least through till April 22, we've got existing expansion plans, and we're working with developers and colleagues from different projects different schemes to increase the network, because ultimately the objective of the City Council is to have a citywide bike share scheme which enables shorter distance trips by a zero carbon form of transport. Next slide, please. So just important to emphasise again the considerations of why we're doing this. So we've gone through the who, why, what, where, when, and now it's the why we're doing this. Well, it's part of the City Council's Connecting Leicester strategy. The City Mayor's economic vision for the city, the transport elements of that, the development elements of that. We've had a bike share scheme as part of our Cycle City Action Plan for the last 5 years. We went through the bubble, as we say, and we're coming out the other side now with a scheme which we can take forward with and grow as part of the transport, or the public transport and active travel strategies of the city. Santander, and particularly an element of crowdfunding, which we're developing ideas about for the expansion plans, was attractive to us. So it was a good stimulus and brought together the thinking and the stimulus to actually get on and deliver this scheme within the city. We're also really considering with Ride-on the development of micro-mobility, and they will be establishing a research and development topic within the city around the electric bikes that they own and develop, and they'll have with us for at least the first 5 years of the contract, and in all likelihood the following 5 years for the contract extension. And it has focused attention around the COVID-19 resilience planning, which has relevance to the climate crisis that we'll all be facing, or we are all facing, at the same time. Next slide, please. Okay, yeah, that's a very brief overview of the scheme. Happy to take questions towards the end, and I'll hand back to Beate as the chair. Thank you.
Right, Andy, yeah, thanks very much. It's over to me on this one. No, really interesting stuff. I'm a big supporter of Santander bikes in London, and yeah, it's nice that this is spreading across the UK as well. Right, so without further ado, from my memories as a young man of Grifters and the Chopper, for those who remember those, Raleigh's quite a topical name for me. So I'd like to pass you over to Ed Pegram from Raleigh, who is going to cover his presentation. Thank you, Ed.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting us to speak on this. Really excited about the possibilities for micro-mobility, bike share, electric bikes, and certainly cargo bikes. So my role at Raleigh is predominantly working with businesses and local authorities. I've had a real a privilege, I guess, to work on various projects, and I think probably one of the most notable was the introduction of traditional bikes into Birmingham City, and for that project we partnered with the Active Wellbeing Society, and if you haven't heard of those guys, it's worth googling them. They work with local authorities or any community project on the introduction of bikes, and that project stands out because we introduced around 7,000 bikes into Birmingham City, predominantly aimed at deprived areas, and that in itself has huge social and economic benefits. Not only the fact that people are getting exercise, that it's improving their mental health, their general well-being, but also for those people that perhaps individual ownerships of bicycles and e-bikes, and even to some extent bike share is out of scope. It gives them the ability to travel further distances and really reap the benefits of accessing different parts of the city. So that was probably one of the highlights for me. Really interesting project. But today I'm just going to talk briefly about the partnerships and the work that I've done with local authorities on the introduction of cargo bikes. So next slide, please. So fundamentally, please forgive me if I'm teaching you to suck eggs, but fundamentally a cargo bike is a versatile cycle that's got a big box on the front, and there's lots of different types. Some of them are flatbed, some of them are enclosed boxes. You can take pets. I really like that image there of the baboo bike with the dog in the front. Not sure my dog would be able to sit still enough to go in one of those, but liked it nonetheless. Our two bikes that we have available are both enclosed and lockable, so they're very specific objectives that they can achieve. And actually, one of the pictures there, the one on the far left, is another project that I was really lucky to work on, which was a food bank in Islington called the Arc Centre. Really needed a better way of delivering products to families across Islington, and part of that is mainly due to the gear change document and the changes in infrastructure across, in this instance, northeast London, and the introduction of cycle lanes and pedestrian only lanes. And what they were doing was either deliveries on foot, which is obviously very time consuming, or delivering via commercial vehicle, which can be quite costly. And also in terms of the time aspect of it, the route that they had to take meant that deliveries were taking about 40 minutes to do perhaps 1 or 2 homes, and the cost of that is obviously quite significant. I think what we did here was showed how cargo bikes can cover great distances at very low cost, with real ease. So all our cargo bikes are less than 1 meter wide, so they can go down any of the cycle superhighways, any of the bicycle lanes or bus lanes. They're also quite prominent on the road, which means that safety and security for the people using them. I mean, Damien pictured there, our main contact at the Arc Centre. He said he feels really safe on the road because they're so big, so they're quite dominant, which was a really interesting bit of feedback, because I know that bike security is a real issue, generally speaking, and obviously the introduction of cycle lanes has been great for people feeling confident on the road. So in short, cargo bikes are efficient, cost effective, and obviously great for the environment. You know, they reduce the necessity for commercial vehicles. They don't eradicate it, but what they can do is they can effectively introduce an alternative for some of the journeys taken by a cargo bike. Next slide, please. So this is really interesting, and I don't want to bore you too much data, but across UK roads, and I think we focus too much on urban environments. If I'm honest, the scope for cargo bikes could be across interurban, so rural and interurban, and connect rural communities as well as interurban journeys. So the scope for them is really wide. I mean, you know, they have our bikes, for example, have a range of up to 40 miles, depending on the conditions, the terrain, and the amount of goods that you're carrying within the box. But it's good to get some context as to why now, and why e-bikes, why cargo bikes now. So obviously road traffic pre-COVID was on the increase significantly. 30% of the emissions that are made up in the UK come from commercial vehicles. If you look at average road speeds across the UK, they're reducing. You know, London, for example, is down to something like 9 miles an hour. So efficiency of these deliveries is changing. Obviously, COVID had an effect on this. People are driving less and walking and cycling more, which is great. So I think what we're trying to say is that cargo bikes have their place, and perhaps instead of driving around in a large commercial vehicle that's perhaps 1/3 full, you know, what could be done by a cargo bike? Next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, so again, just to sort of reiterate this point, cargo bikes and electric bikes as well, whether it's individualized transport or transport for commercial purposes, you know, the key issues that we're facing at the minute are air quality, and particularly in urban environments, so emissions, congestion, efficiency. There's lots of you know, initial barriers to cargo bikes. I think there's big concerns about security, how they can be used, how they can be tracked, you know, safety and security on the roads. And actually, what we've found is lots of those have been overcome with not an education piece, that's not the right way to say it, but you know, a trial, getting the product in front of people. And pre-lockdown, a huge amount of what I did was getting the bikes in front of people so they could see what they were about, really understanding how cargo bikes could fit into either small businesses or you know, from an infrastructure point of view. Actually, it's really vast, the tasks that they can perform. We were fortunate enough to partner with Ringway Jacobs, who are an infrastructure business, and they actually trialled the bikes for minor road and pathway repairs, which was really interesting. That was something that we never thought possible. You know, they're putting paving slabs and bags of cement and all sorts of things. And I'm sure Michael could talk for ages on cargo bikes in construction and the possibilities there. And I think for us, Raleigh as a brand, what we want to do is just show the scope of cargo bikes, how they can be used, but do it sustainably. And again, we were in London a while back, and Pedal Me were there as well. And I think, you know, to support with training of the introduction of cargo bikes is essential for us. You know, cargo bikes are a totally different entity to a normal bike, and for us to introduce them sustainably is absolutely key. And you know, like I said, the key thing for us is the potential is not for them to eradicate commercial vehicles, but to sit alongside them. And you know, there's lots of research that suggests 25% of journeys taken by commercial vehicles could be done by cargo bikes. And really for Raleigh, that's what we want to do. We want to get the product out there and get people trialing it, and that's exactly what we're doing with local authorities. So again, using the Active Wellbeing Society as an example, they were the first to introduce cargo bikes into Birmingham City. They were used for food bank deliveries and various short journeys where potentially it would have been a commercial vehicle prior to that. Nottingham City, Sheffield, and Outspoken Cycles in Cambridge as well. We've partnered with those guys to offer try before you buy schemes. And this is something we do centrally as well. So we work with businesses and any local authority that's interested. But the schemes are really rolling out across the country now, which is really interesting. And they seem to be all of a very similar grain. So the premise is that the local authority has a number of cargo bikes that are available for small businesses to test at a very low cost. And you know, for businesses, that's great. It's low cost, it's low risk. They don't have to purchase anything up front, and they can really see if cargo bikes can be a viable solution for them. And I think it's only going to increase. You know, you've got to look at what's happening at the minute across the UK with e-commerce booming, and the demand for same day and next day deliveries is huge. And you know, our thought process is that a lot of those could be done, and already is being done by cargo bikes. So that trend and this demand for that type of need for same day and next day delivery is not going to go away. I think that will continue even post COVID. Next slide, please. So really, this is how I want to finish, is give you a visual representation of the indicative costs of a cargo bike or electric cargo bike versus an equivalent commercial vehicle. You know, it's around 10% of the overall costs of a commercial vehicle. So substantial, cost reduction. And really, just to summarize, we as a business are absolutely happy to work with any local authority. And really for us now, the next steps are building a database of case studies of how cargo bikes and electric bikes, but predominantly cargo bikes, can be introduced, be more efficient, reduce costs for businesses. They'll certainly aid in post-COVID recovery. That is absolutely, fundamental. They absolutely will. But for us, like I said, it's about introducing them in a sustainable way. But really, for us, the case studies and the trials across local authorities and for us centrally just prove the theory and show how efficient and really the major benefits of them with reduced congestion, reduced emissions. Obviously, they have other benefits that include the health and well-being of the user themselves. So instead of being stuck in traffic for periods of time, you're on a bike pedaling around the city, which can be nice if the weather's good. And I know Pedal Me have vouched for this, and I've seen them out in all weathers. So it's not just winter. And really for us, it's about catching up with our European counterparts, and hopefully with the gear change document and all the changes in infrastructure, people will feel secure enough on the roads to cycle more, and with the introduction of cargo bikes, businesses will feel more inclined to introduce them as well. And that's all from me, and I welcome any questions at the end. If you have anything in particular, please feel free to reach out directly. Thank you.
Right, thanks, Ed. No, really exciting stuff. I was thinking it just shows that because we're on a larger bike now, we need to make sure we're working together as in a highway authority to ensure we've got the right infrastructure. And look at these cost savings is really interesting from a point of, you're going to be your outlay is going to be a lot lower. And then again, the other stuff you touched on the security. So just to remind everybody, please, questions put in the box on the right hand side. So we're taking notes on these to put them at the end. But if you don't put the questions, we'll probably start making some up as well for everybody. So going on now, so I'm going to put you in touch with Ben Knowles, CEO for Pedal Me, those pink bikes that we see around London quite frequently. And off you go, Ben.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Knowles. I'm rider and chief exec at Pedal Me. For those who've not met us before, we take cargo bike use to its logical limit and really push the limits on what's possible by cargo bike. So I was really interested to see the figures that Ed was showing, with showing some 25% of jobs being possible to do by cargo bike. We actually think the figure's quite a lot higher, but I guess that's because we're looking at moving our largest vehicles can move up to 300 kilos at a time. I'm a former transport planner, and I saw this opportunity and this need for a service that provided an alternative to motor vehicles for the purposes of allowing more dramatic changes to our cities. Because I felt that while business was fighting against positive change and the change that needs to happen for tackling climate change, for making our cities more pleasant, tackling air pollution, all this kind of thing, I felt that I wanted to remove that business resistance by providing an alternative that is faster, cheaper, and also has really shows CSR to be at the front and center of the business's values, just to remove that conflict. Really what we've ended up becoming is like a center of excellence on cargo bike use. That started from us carrying people around, and basically because we were carrying people, we had to train all our riders to a really high standard, such that people felt safe to get a lift with us. Some of you will have seen that we were on the BBC News a couple of weeks ago. So one of the things that we're helping with during this COVID period is we're transporting cancer patients who need to still get in to have chemotherapy, and other people who are sick who need to travel into hospital but are very, very anxious about getting sick. We're transporting them to hospital. These very vulnerable people trust us, and that's because of our training. What we don't want to do is we don't want to just limit our impact to only the jobs that we can do. It's always been our ambition to help other businesses to use cargo bikes, even if it's not quite to the extent that that we use cargo bikes, if that makes sense. I'm not expecting that every business that it's sensible for them to train their riders to be able to carry 300 kilos, because that's a specialist thing to do, and you've got us if you want to do that. A lot of the jobs are a lot smaller and can be done by lower capacity cargo bikes. So one of the really exciting things is that we have started training businesses from the construction sector, from landscaping, from all sorts of other businesses, and empowering them to use cargo bikes for their own internal logistics. I'm really excited that that's a way that we're going to be able to amplify our impact as we grow. Next slide, please. Cool. So here's a heat map showing our movements in a typical month. We're covering a very big area. Our highly specialist, highly trained riders can cover great distances, and that again opens up a larger number of jobs that can be done by cargo bike. Our longest journeys are sort of like 15, 20 miles, that kind of thing, from one end of London right to the other end. There's a regular journey we do where we pick up around about 200 boxes of flowers from Hounslow and then deliver them to homes in East London. That's the sort of thing that would traditionally have been done with a van, but because of this suite of tools that we've developed, we can do that job more cost effectively than could be done with a motor vehicle. Next slide, please. We're also helping empower other businesses in other ways too. So we work with Lime, and we worked with Mobike. We're able, the techniques that we have developed originally actually came from transporting bikes for a community cycling project. We're able to move up to 10 of these Lime bikes, which are pretty heavy beasts, which I'm pretty confident is more than you could fit in a transit van. But without all the inconveniences of using a transit van. This is really useful for operators of bike share operations, because one of the weaknesses in this initial scale up period of bike sharing has been that the CO2 emissions of the use of the bikes has ended up higher than would ideally have been the case, because there are motor vehicles running around replacing batteries and servicing the bikes. If you can move that to being done by bike, then that's a win for everyone involved. That's a win for the city. That's a win for the consumers, because they get we can provide better service cheaper because we can do more jobs in the same time, which is the same thing that underpins everything we do. And there's less pollution, less road danger. Everyone's a winner from us being involved in this. Next slide, please. Although we do the big jobs recovering bikes, we also take care of the battery swaps. What's fairly unique about us in the logistics sector is that we do lots of different types of jobs all mixed in together. And that allows us to be more efficient overall, and therefore charge the client less money. It's really complicated to do, and you need, again, really highly trained, really switched on, really motivated human beings to make it happen. But that's part of our formula. Next slide, please. We do, here's us out delivering vegetable kit boxes, but I just like this picture because it gives you an idea of the scale of what can be carried by our bikes with our highly trained riders. Next slide, please. And if the bikes aren't big enough, then the trailers mean you can amp it up again. These techniques allow us to be significantly cheaper than people using vans because the time per drop is just less, because we can bypass traffic and because parking is much simpler. Next slide, please. And yeah, we also do all sorts of mad jobs like moving furniture around. Yeah, this flexibility of our service is a real key to the usefulness of it. By doing lots of different sorts of jobs, we provide one touch point for customers for the vast majority of their logistics, and that just makes us a lot more useful to them. It's also pretty spectacular, and one of our values is entertain the city. So we like to make people smile as we're traveling. So in the current situation, our data shows that we're considerably faster than motor vehicles in the centre of London. We lose a little bit in the yellow region in terms of transport speed, but the trick here is that our journey distances are less because we're able to use cut-throughs and cycle tracks. Some streets are two-way for one-way street and the like. So we're broadly competitive across this region. And then we start to lose out in the outer region where motor traffic speeds are higher, more like 18 miles an hour, sort of 27, 28 kilometers an hour. We are working on projects to reduce that difference by, we already make changes to the bikes when we get them to improve the aerodynamics, and we have some more projects running to help improve that again, which should allow us to be competitive across a bigger area and in less dense cities. Next slide, please. On average, parking time is ruinous for logistics companies, 9 to 15 minutes. You'll have seen that lots of delivery drivers have adopted trolleys or have backpacks to allow them to do a lot of the, to cut out on the parking, allow them to walk around doing the drops, but it's fundamentally less efficient than using a cargo bike, which you can take right to the door with everything on board. Next slide, please. People often misunderstand this point. So vans can carry more than our bikes can. But the trick is that you can actually, using cargo bikes, you can actually cut down the mileage needed to complete a job, even though the vehicle can carry less. And that's because it's just about smart organization of logistics. There are some jobs for which that doesn't work for, and for which more changes to city streets are needed to push the economics. But the vast majority of delivery work out there can be done more efficiently by cargo bike, especially high capacity cargo bikes like ours. Next slide, please.
Ben, sorry, I'm just going to give you a little nudge because we're just wary of time. So we've got to get Phil on next as well. Thank you.
Roger. Two slides. This is some new research. So we've been looking at our CO2 emissions and therefore looking at where we can make the biggest gains to reduce our existing CO2 emissions. We think that there are improvements to be made around using slightly less electricity and getting more distance covered per calorie burnt by the rider, and that's covered by the aerodynamics improvements that we're working on. But you can see that the difference between using motor vehicles and using cargo bikes in terms of carbon emissions is huge. Absolutely massive difference. Electric is obviously a really good step in the right direction, and we should clearly be pushing towards electric for those jobs that are too big for cargo bikes, where items are 150, 200 kilos plus. But for everything else, there's a really big advantage in moving across to using cargo bikes. Next slide, please. So I just want to reinforce this one particular bit. So the CO2 emissions for making one vehicle, for making one van, we can build 3 of our bikes and between them cover 300,000 kilometers. So before a motor vehicle has even got out of the garage, you can have 3 bikes and 300,000 kilometers. So more than a lifetime's use from a new vehicle. That applies whether it's electric or motor powered, fossil fuel powered. Cool. Last slide, please. And can you just click through them if we're short for time? A few points in here, and just bring it all up and let people read through it.
Yeah, sorry about that, Ben. I've just got to be very wary of time so we can get Phil his allocated time. No, Ben, thanks very much. Very interesting stuff. And this is a good thing. We've also got Twitter and LinkedIn and other links, especially after this event, that we'll get a lot of questions out and answers to people. Right, I'm going to quickly pass over to Phil. So Phil, sorry about this. I'll let you kick off right now. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Just how long have I got, Michael, just to make sure we leave enough time for questions?
Well, we're supposed to finish around 1, so it's 1:45 now.
Okay, I tell you what, I'll try and be as quick as possible because I think lots of people probably have some questions. Great, hi everyone. So I'm Philip Ellis. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Beryl. If you want to click on maybe onto the next slide, just to introduce Beryl a little bit. So do click on the slides there. So we deliver shared micromobility systems in partnership with cities. We do this with a variety of cities throughout the UK, and we do this in 2 ways really. One is we operate our own systems where we bid for and win contracts, and we own the relationship with the city and the rider. And we also sell our technology platform to leading transport operators and cities to help them run their micromobility systems. And we do that with TfL and with TfWM in this country. Next slide, please. Perhaps click on 2 just to save time. As I say, we win long-term exclusive contracts and become a city's integrated mobility partner to enable modal shift away from private cars and build the sustainability of our cities. Like that is what we do. That is everything we do. I guess just quickly, so we operate thousands of bikes and electric bikes throughout the UK right now in shared systems, and in the context of this panel, we also have operated our bike share systems for quite a while now with e-cargo bikes. So we're quite experienced operators of e-cargo bikes, so can attest to some of the logistic points that other panel members were making. But we also do offer cargo bikes as part of a sharing service. And most recently, we've also begun offering e-scooters as part of the UK's e-scooter trial. So really our strategy is to be an integrated micromobility provider for cities. So in the short term, we deliver on a city's active travel strategies and embed behaviour change towards sustainable shared mobility. And that's really why we fill out that whole cohort of micromobility options. It is about being that fully integrated partner to cities and building up, a really decent sized addressable market in a city that lots of us on this panel have just spoken about the different use cases for e-bikes and cargo bikes specifically. In the long term, we're aligned to the long-term infrastructure investments on mobility hubs, EV charging networks and things like that. And that's also part of our strategy of partnering with cities. Next slide. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about e-bikes. So I think, we've operated e-bikes for about a year now in the UK. And these are in partnership with cities. So the two places where we've got e-bikes deployed are in Watford and Norwich, and they are part of exclusive long-term bike share systems. And I think, yeah, I think I'll talk a little bit in a moment about the behaviours that we see and the sort of people that we're using e-bikes, but I think just a word of, I guess, optimism for particularly for local authorities looking at e-bikes, but looking at shared mobility with somewhat, trepidation, having observed what might have gone on with people, like the Mobike and Offos of this world, and potentially slightly worried about the sort of dockless e-scooter trials and tribulations that have been observed in Europe and America, and indeed one or two places close to home potentially over the last few months. But yeah, I think that the e-bike, a good, quality sharing e-bike, does have quite a few differences that I think councils can get some comfort from. So first of all, from a funding perspective, it depends on the commercial deployment, the operating model and the commerciality of a deployment as to what's appropriate. But I think two things jump out to us, and one is that while funding from a local authority is always, and particularly now, extremely challenging, there is nonetheless, we see quite a few opportunities for local authorities to apply for, bid for, and win funding from central government. So we've been able to deploy bikes and e-bikes through, up until now, through things like Transforming Cities funding. We've also had programs funded through local transport plans, but we've also had programs now starting to come through that are funded through high street funds, and we're talking to people about town deals and things like that. So I think there's the opportunity to work on getting these deployed. Beyond that, though, from a commercial perspective, private financing is starting to come through on this sort of asset class, on this vehicle class, which might make commercial deployments something that's more doable as well. The second point I wanted to talk about was security. So I know in the chat people have been speaking about bike share systems that have struggled through vandalism and things like that, and that is an absolutely real concern for any deployment of anything that you put into the public realm. But from our experience, we deliver software to other people's bike share systems, as I talked about, specifically for the purpose of monitoring and recovering bikes, and we also use that ourselves in our own systems. And so we see that particularly on e-bikes, the level of sort of tracking technology that you can implement and the control that you can have over the vehicle, for example, remote immobilizing of the bike and cutting off the power and things like that, and of course like really, really accurate, reliable GPS, means that e-bikes are a inherently slightly more secure asset, and like markedly more secure than the previous iteration of dockless bikes that Duncan was talking about earlier. And I'm sure Andy will as they move toward a live scheme, hopefully see some of that as well. And I guess the last thing is, a big part of the services that we offer, and a big part of our philosophy in implementing sharing fleets, is just the amount of data that we can contribute to help demonstrate to local authorities and even potentially central government, if it's funding that's come through that mechanism, of the sort of impact that the e-bike systems are having. And that's we're particularly interested in and looking to work with local authorities who have large scale sharing e-bike programs that are coming up. But we're also we're doing some slightly smaller deployments as well. And I think the e-bike as a commercial vehicle, has more interesting commerciality than perhaps it was possible with push bikes. So, for example, we're adding just a small fleet of 30 e-bikes into our Hereford scheme over the next couple of months, and really innovations in the technology and in the charging and things like that allow us to do that. The next slide, please. I guess one of the things, so sharing makes a difference. So I guess this is sort of like, the excuse of why I think it's interesting, hopefully, to hear from sharing providers in the context of sort of broader active travel goals. And I often think about our systems as sort of giant, behavior change projects. And I think there is some really good correlation between where cities have implemented well-run bike share systems and the long-term impact on cycling and active travel. And effectively, hopefully now I think we can see that supercharged as e-bikes become more available. So yeah, for example, within our systems, just a few stats there, 58% of people come back to cycling after having had a break. And most of those people had returned after having had a long break of 5 years. So having, bike share systems and e-bike share systems available and on street really does encourage people to start cycling again. I think in the context of COVID as well, we saw that, in the plenary session earlier, everyone talked about, April, May of 2020 and the boom in cycling that came through people feeling safe to move on foot or move on two wheels. And that was a fantastic sort of potentially once in a generation opportunity to demonstrate unequivocally that, if you make a safe environment, people will take to active travel. And in a slightly smaller way, I think what our schemes are showing to us is that if you run a bike share scheme in a safe and accessible way, we're getting people back on the bike and staying on the bike. A couple more data points there. 37% of pre-existing cyclists cycle more often since using barrel bikes. So even those who were sort of self-diagnosed cyclists, find themselves adding a little bit more cycling into their journeys and through the added convenience. And really, the whole point here is 28% of our customers are using their own cars less often, which is brilliant. And I think in the context of e-bikes and bike share and micromobility more generally, I've sort of developed a sort of a mini thesis here that bikes create new behaviors, as I've described there. E-bikes create new journeys. So a shared e-bike opens up new journeys to people that they might previously have not thought were possible by bike. People can go further. They can take on terrain that they may not have otherwise taken on. They can go faster and enjoy the ride. Just a word on e-scooters, because it's very topical as well. I think what's very interesting, although not the topic of this discussion, is if e-bikes are creating new journeys, e-scooters are creating new users. I certainly haven't figured out quite why they appeal so well to particularly under 35s, but they do. And they create a whole massive new cohort of users who are then part of our sharing system and part of the customers, and effectively sort of cross-pollinating onto the different modes of vehicle that we offer in different cities. And I think that's quite a positive shot in the arm that e-scooters are providing. Next slide, please. So I guess
I'm going to give you a little nudge.
Sure thing. Okay, so I guess just a real quick thing then on the bike itself. Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, safety is absolutely critical. As you've seen from the photos, we operate all of our bikes out of fixed bays and fixed docking locations. We call them barrel bays. That's really important for the safety of everybody else, basically. All of the pedestrians and all of the other road users, that's really important. But the bike itself, to encourage this sort of behavior change, has to be a really high quality, premium, safe mode. It has to be, equipped with all the latest safety features, things that we consider quite important, like a mid-mount motor, which is a sort of what's on a lot of the sharing e-bikes. Of course, premium lighting features and docking / barrel bay sort of infrastructure is all really, really important. And I'd be really, really happy to go into some of the details of like the bike itself, right? It is about the bike, contrary to what Lance Armstrong had said. And so, yeah, I'd be really happy to go into that. And just one last slide, for example, just a photo of our sort of schemes that we're deploying now, and the sort of schemes that we see as certainly the sort of medium and long-term future of micromobility systems in the UK.
Right, Phil, thank you very much. Right, because of time, I'm going to group the first question in. So it was mentioned about the irregular parking they've experienced with dockless biking. and the maintenance and how these bikes can be maintained and the battery change. So I'll chuck that to Duncan first, because you did mention something in the chat box earlier about parking and how you're going to mitigate that, and then we'll go to Phil.
That's fine. So yeah, as I mentioned in my presentation as well, we deal with that with only allowing riders to end in designated bays. So we work with local authorities to make sure that there are a sufficient number. And as I say, the rider can only end in the bay, and the technology is now sufficiently accurate and robust to allow for that to happen. In terms of how we change batteries and do maintenance and things like that, Ben talked about this as well, and we use cargo bikes to do a large chunk of that. Anything that we can't do with a cargo bike, we do with an electric van, and we have electric charging facilities at our warehouse. So yeah, the industry is very much shifting towards that. I mean, Ben summed it up pretty well around just cycling through London versus driving through London, particularly in London at least, but it goes the same for many cities. It's just so much quicker to do on a bike of some description.
And Phil, same?
Yeah, similar. So we do all of our battery swapping through cargo bikes. We've always done it like that. But obviously, because we often implement these barrel bays, we're also integrating over the next few months some on-street charging, which is flexible, so can be used by ourselves or used by other people who might have an electric bike that wants charging.
So say for somebody decided to steal one and just dump it somewhere, you just go straight out and take it back?
Exactly, yeah. So we sort of remotely cut the power and immobilize the bike if we think it's safe to do so. And indeed, yeah, we send one of our team to go collect it on street. And yeah, that we get, yeah, as I say, we lose very, very few of these, you know, talking less than a handful over the course of a year, even though we've got hundreds deployed.
Okay, all right, thank you. Beate, do you want to do the next question, please?
Quite a few questions about expanding schemes and bringing them to different areas, and I thought maybe that we could just, if people would be prepared to share where they've seen schemes working, maybe where they weren't quite expecting, or use cases that weren't what they first expected to see when they launched the scheme. I know you've got to go quite quickly, Ed, so do you want to jump in? Is there anything that you've seen your cargo bikes used for you weren't previously expecting?
Yeah, lots of things. But the main one for me was bikes in construction and infrastructure. To see them effectively the problem was that the big businesses had operatives driving around in large vehicles that were loaded up with everything they'd ever need, rather than almost like a responsive type operation. And the idea is the cargo bike would be loaded for that day's work and that day's work only, and then it didn't take, you know, it'd be reducing emissions, and it'd take a cargo bike and one operative as opposed to a big commercial vehicle and two operatives. So that was a big eye-opener for us.
Anyone else in terms of like different use cases that you weren't quite getting, Andy, when you launched in Leicester? Are you seeing have you had unexpected bits of research come through?
We've not launched yet, so clarify the question for me, please.
Sorry, in terms of because you were doing some research before about where you should put the scheme, so what was it completely expected where you were going to put the docking stations, or did you get people wanting them in places that you were not, that were a surprise?
Well, realistically, we're still going through that process. We've introduced the first 15 docking station locations. The next 35 are out to consultation with councillors. Since the scheme became evident to people, since the bikes appeared on street for the pilot testing, we're inundated with people asking us for them in their locales. You know, the cricket club this morning were on the phone saying, "Where's our bike share docking station?" The councillors are saying, "Well, you know, can you put them here? Can't you put them there?" And people are getting, you know, people are responsive to it because they see it as a tangible scheme. We think it's more going to be about expectation management, about what we can realistically deliver. that doesn't tip over the operator into financial inviolability, rather than whether the scheme is going to work. So we'll report back to you in the future. We'll be happy to share how it evolves, but we're at a very starting position, really.
Thanks. Philip, you see lots of different uses of your bikes, presumably quite digitally. You get traces of what they're doing. Are they doing things that you expect or different things?
Well, the bikes themselves are doing exactly what you'd expect them to do, really. There's a few interesting points of data that comes out. I mean, as I said, it surprises me quite how popular e-scooters are, for example, amongst the younger cohort of people who, I would, have thought maybe want to cycle. I think, there's really interesting things that come out. We've been running some free rides and access for NHS and key workers, and what we've seen over the pandemic, which is really interesting, is sort of traditional usage. So like 2 peaks, people in the morning, people in the afternoon, coming home from work, which is exactly what you'd expect to see normally. But then if you look at the rest of society, or at least our customer base, using our systems, there's basically nothing going on until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then people start to emerge from their houses and get a daily dose of outside and start cycling or scooting, just to get outside. I think that's quite interesting. And then I guess the last interesting thing that we see is, as I say, we track most of the Santander bikes in London. We track a lot of, obviously, all of our own bikes, and we do see some bikes in some extremely interesting locations. There's one in Ghana, no idea how it got there. There's a few in the Netherlands. We saw a couple in Romania, and things like that. And it is quite remarkable how far these things go.
Maybe not expansion to Romania, but Duncan.
People might be surprised bikes end up in Romania, actually. When I was at Santander Cycles, I recall that we did have one turn up on eBay in Australia as well. So they do seem to get everywhere. In terms of examples, I think, and someone alluded to this in the chat as well, we'll bike share work out in the outer areas. I think the question was around London, but a case study that I can give you is we operate scooters, but similar but different, in Warsaw, and there's an area in outer Warsaw where we deploy scooters, and we're just seeing how it would go. And we've discovered that 95% of the scooters just stay in that area. So there's this kind of just ecosystem of people going to the main transport hub, going back home, that the churn is very, very localized. And I think that's really interesting, and potentially something that, could mean that bike sharing, scooter sharing could work in outer London, or outer areas. I think that, as I say, the question was about London, but outer areas of cities more than potentially has been anticipated in the past.
I just had to add really, really quickly. We've got a bike share system in Hereford that's really, really good from a usage sense and a commercial sense. And that's a town of 60,000 people. Cargo bike operations, like everything we've talked about here in terms of best practice, exists in that scheme in Hereford. And as I say, it's a small town, and so for anybody who's looking at those sorts of solutions, it's definitely doable now, which I think is really positive.
Yeah, as someone running a cargo bike scheme in a 5,000 and 10,000 size town, it's interesting how far it goes. What about you, Ben? Have you got any similar experiences?
I was just thinking from a transport planning perspective that it's something that's always struck me that in London in particular, we have this really good network moving around the centre, to get in and out of the centre. There's all these trips that are going around the centre that are unfulfilled, and if you do as I used to do and cycle around and knock on people's windows when they're stuck in traffic and just ask what they're doing, you'll quite often fight because they're stuck, they're not going anywhere. It seems irrational for them to be doing that. But when you dig down into it, quite often they're making those trips around the centre that there just isn't provision for. So I see doctors' bikes and scooters really helping to fill that gap and help change those spaces. And we see quite a lot of demand from further out. We cover a 9-mile radius, so really quite a lot of London. Yeah, I mean, there's clear demand there. The difficulty we have is getting the density of trips out there to make it work financially, which I guess will be the issue for Dockers operators as well.
Can I bring one question for everybody then? So just thoughts on training. So I know Ben supplies high quality training, but also from a supplier perspective, as these bikes are now going on the network, you will be getting some people who don't have the right skills to jump on, especially a cargo bike straight away. But what you're thinking and what are you going to be doing to promote? So just go around the table. We'll start with Ed first.
If they go on, I'll jump in there. So for us, it's absolutely, like I said in my presentation, it's about introducing them sustainably. And when we work with businesses, we absolutely offer an introduction to at least, at bare minimum, some basic training on e-bikes and in particular cargo bikes. I think the cargo bikes for us is absolutely fundamental to have training as part of the introduction, whether it's a local authority or a business.
Okay, Andy, what's your thoughts for your area then?
In terms of training or in terms of cargo bikes?
In terms of training standards.
Yeah, I mean, we've got some cargo bikes as well. We don't let ours out without people being trained on them. We can't do that for insurance purposes, and that'll be the same. That'll be a challenge with other organisations, whether it's city council or independent providers. In terms of training for people who use our bike share fleet, our social inclusion project, which will probably be a sum of about 40,000 a year, a key element of that is to provide training and access for people who can't currently ride bikes. Our target is to target communities, or one of the key targets is to target communities within which levels of bike ownership are 10, 20%, pretty minimal. People don't have access to bikes. They need access to bikes for the types of trips that they need to make. It's been very difficult this year, the last 12 months, to get bikes, but also people need to be trained to ride them effectively. It's not specifically because they're e-bikes or it's a bike share bike. People just need training. Adults just need training, levels of support. That big barrier to cycling on a mass scale has not gone away. Bikeability hasn't addressed that nationally. It's focused around schools. It's not really evolved into the kind of adult cycle training provision that is needed in towns and cities throughout the country. Although there's great provision in London, doesn't exist. The bike share schemes are a way of doing that. There will be a methodology behind it of enhancing mass cycle training and mass access for adults in the process, and people of all abilities and communities. If they don't do that, they'll fail. They must do that to secure the future that we all want for bike share bikes. And
yeah, going on that one point is because in London I've seen quite a few operators I'm aware of not doing the training. I'll just pass to Ben because I know we're both out on the roads quite a lot ourselves. What we pick up, go on, Ben.
We're obviously very keen on training for what we do. I'm really, really anxious that this training conversation doesn't spill over too far down the road into becoming a barrier, because training should be about empowering youth and empowering people to make more journeys and to use bikes in different ways, and not about stopping people using bikes, because that's obviously that's not what we're going to achieve. Andy, I'd be really interested to have a chat with you about the community cycling project that we used to run when I was a transport planner, and which academy grew out of. And we might be able to help you grab some ideas of how that project works. So I'd be interested to have a chat with you direct. But on a
yeah, I'll put my contacts in the chat.
Yes, please. And I think that there's a balance to be struck here. I think large scale professional logistics, where people are carrying big things, and if that's completely uninhibited, then it becomes a bit of a hazard for other users and brings the sector into disrepute and inhibits its growth. And that's one pitfall that I see. Another pitfall that I see is people not having adequate training to be able to do the range of jobs that could be done by cargo bike, and therefore cargo bikes never reaching their potential and never reaching their potential to face the number of trips that could be done by cargo bike. Yeah, I think it's a complicated discussion. It's
there's a balance there. There's a balance there to consider. Duncan, anything on that side?
Yeah, so obviously we've got two angles on this. It's consumer training, and part of our rollouts involves putting on training programs. On the other side, it's how we train our staff and team to ride cargo bikes. As has been alluded to, when you're carrying around quite a considerable weight, particularly with batteries, that can be quite unwieldy. So we need to make sure that our guys are, excuse me, all trained up. And the other thing that we do is we're using both two-wheeled bikes and four-wheeled bikes. The four-wheeled more like a van, I suppose, an electric bike van. So you can kind of get a slightly different group of people involved in riding those around, because it requires a little bit less kind of commitment to the elements, I suppose. But yeah, the training is absolutely essential. But as Ben says, it should not be considered as a barrier.
No. And Phil, last one, because I know we're about time.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Ben said around the purpose of training. I guess our experience was the first cargo bike that we introduced into a sharing scheme was a two-wheeler. And what we're doing moving forward on future ones is offering two-wheelers and three-wheelers, because although three-wheelers might be a little more cumbersome, if someone hasn't used a cargo bike before, for the first couple of times they might feel more comfortable getting on a three-wheeler, appreciating the utility, and then either sort of deciding that they can go a bit faster on a two-wheeler or something like that. So from a sharing context on cargo bikes, that's our approach.
Right, I think it's time that I wrap it up. So thanks for all the speakers. Thank you to Beate for being my partner on this. And Landor links. What we'll do for the audience is we'll collate. I imagine they're going to collate all the questions and maybe get back to everybody as much as we can. Keep your eyes on Twitter as well. And there's plenty of ways to contact the people that are on this stage. So I will sign off. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Stay safe. And goodbye.
Thanks very much. Come join us at our stand.
Cheers.